Hello and welcome to the Resume Building and Interviewing for a TLD Career event. My name is Luke Peterson, and I'm a Port Operations Fellow at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I'm joined today by an all-star lineup of transportation, logistics, and distribution professionals from Newark Alliance, Farmland Fresh Dairies, Prologis, and NFI. A couple housekeeping rules before we begin. As participants, your cameras and microphones have been muted, but please be sure to post questions in the chat and we will answer them during our Q&A section towards the end of the event. This event is being recorded for future playback and will be available on the Port Authority's YouTube page. As I mentioned, I work for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which is a bi-state agency responsible for keeping the region moving by air, land, rail, and sea. Specifically, my colleagues and I work in the Port Department. This department is tasked with operating and maintaining the Port of New York and New Jersey, which is a vital link to the regional and national supply chain. Our partners today come to us from the Council on Port Performance's Workforce Development Implementation Group. Comprised of shipping industry executives, the Council on Port Performance provides oversight on the implementation of programs and initiatives that will improve efficiency and service reliability in the port. The Workforce Development Team's mission is the promotion of opportunities in our industry for new talent to learn, grow, and find a career path with a high impact on the region. The port's workforce development efforts include internships, externships, job placement, and more in the Transportation and Logistics Distribution Center. Not only does the Port Authority talk the talk in regard to developing talent, but they walk the walk as well. As a Port Operations Fellow for the past 2 years, I've been rotating through several roles every 6 months within the Port Department, giving myself and other members in the program a holistic view of what the port is involved in. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jesse Hardy from Prologis, who will run through some of the great work that his team is doing. Jesse.
Thanks, Luke. As Luke said, my name is Jesse Hardy. I oversee Prologis' New York and New Jersey market. Prologis is the world's largest owner, operator, and developer of logistics real estate in the world. We own about 5,000 buildings that are worth approximately $150 billion. Those buildings total about 1 billion square feet. So basically what we do is if you're driving down the turnpike and you look to the side and you see one of those big buildings, we probably own one of those big buildings. And then we lease those buildings out to our customers and who use those for logistics and distribution. The New York and New Jersey area is one of the best markets in the U.S. for transportation, logistics, and distribution. So you guys are in the right place for this field. While Prologis has 5 offices around New York and New Jersey, we don't employ that many people directly, but the people who lease our space actually do. We estimate around 850,000 people are employed under Prologis' roof. And that's how Prologis formed a relationship with our next speaker, Jamie Anderson of NFI. NFI is one of our largest customers, and they're a partner of ours in several locations. Jamie is their Director of Talent Pipeline and amazing partner to Prologis. I'm excited to hear from Jamie on her thoughts on career development. And Jamie, why don't you take it from here?
All right, thank you. So welcome everyone. As Jesse said, I'm Jamie Anderson. I'm the Director of Talent Pipeline Programs. Been with NFI a little over 7 years now. And NFI is a third-party logistics company. We are family-owned. We have over 14,000 employees across the United States and Canada. And so we operate a lot of those distribution spaces that he just spoke of, or transportation terminals and the drivers that you see, on the highways as you're out and about. I wanted to share a little bit here of my background because I know a lot of you on this call are either educators or students that are maybe, in high school or just graduating high school and you're exploring some career path options. I started my career in logistics right out of high school as an entry-level material handler, working on a production line. And from there, I then grew into, several other positions within the logistics space, became forklift certified, was able to operate 8 pieces of, industrial powered equipment, learned how to schedule with, the customer service team. I worked in the dispatch office, all while I was going to college. So there's a lot of flexibility in the logistics space. We have a lot of part-time offerings out there. We can work around school schedules. And then upon graduation, I went into operations management. So I was on the operations side before kind of then transferring over into HR and growing into, the talent development space that I'm in now. But there's a lot of possibilities, within supply chain that you can explore and kind of grow into a very successful career, especially in that New Jersey, New York market, as Jesse, talked about there. In the logistics space, I think there's a few qualities that we look for when taking a look at, especially entry-level talent. One of those is going to be flexibility. Supply chain, things change very rapidly, especially if you're in an e-commerce type of, business and building. If all of a sudden orders spike online, then the volume within the distribution center will also spike. Also the flexibility to learn new things. As I said, I learned a lot of different things early on in my career. And I will say that I am so thankful for all those opportunities, because as I've grown in my career, things make a lot more sense to me. I can connect the little dots to the big picture of how the operation truly works. And then you're kind of tying into there, so that eagerness to learn, flexibility, and then just being open to feedback. A lot of organizations in the supply chain space, really strive to help our employees grow, but part of growing and developing is being open to the feedback that your leaders would have to give to you. So being open to that, taking it, looking at yourself and seeing how you can continue to develop and improve your skill set. As you would be looking to interview with supply chain organizations, a lot of them are going, in the direction of behavior-based interviewing. So I have a few examples that I'd like to share with you today around, some tips that you can keep in the back of your mind as you, hopefully have those interviews here in the future. They're all going to be, tell me about a time when this happened. And even if you, have not worked before, and maybe this is your first real job out of high school, you can pull from your school experience to answer these questions. They're all trying to figure out what you've done in the past, because what you have done is a good indication of how you'll handle a similar situation in the future. So one of the examples that I see some, candidates struggle with is, tell me about a time you made a mistake. And a lot of people think that the right answer is to say, oh, well, I never make mistakes. And that's not the case. We're all human. Every single one of us makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. And really what they want to get at is, so when a mistake does happen, how do you handle it? Are you accountable to that mistake? Do you learn from that mistake? And, are you able to help others potentially also learn from that mistake that you made? So thinking through it in that context, what was the situation? What did you do? And then what was the end result? And then with that, if there's questions that anyone would like to ask, I can certainly answer them.
Jamie, can you share some of the benefits of working right after high school while going to college?
Sure. So I know, when I was working in a distribution center and I saw a lot of my peers, they were working in the retail industry or hospitality or in a restaurant. I will say that a lot of organizations' pay rate is a lot higher. There was also a little bit more, there was more flexibility, but there was the stability also. So I knew that they were flexible around my schedule with classes, but I also knew, okay, every week, like this is going to be my hours. I knew when I had to work, so I could plan accordingly. Also, a lot of supply chain organizations, are able to kind of help sometimes with, tuition reimbursement or, help, with a career path that aligns with, if you are going to school. So I think that all of that, is a benefit to continuing to explore a supply chain career.
How did you manage your time with schoolwork and your personal life?
So I will say that there were a few semesters where that did become challenging. But, at the end of the day, I looked at it as, a motivation. I knew that I needed, long term, I didn't necessarily want to be operating a forklift for the rest of my life. It was a great job and a great start to my career. But I used that as motivation to make sure that I dedicated myself to my studies. And I was also very upfront with my manager, right? Like when I had a huge project or huge test coming on, proactively going to them and saying, hey, listen, like, is there anything I can do with my schedule? Maybe adjust my hours here and there. but it was also like solution oriented. So I knew what the business needed, and maybe I couldn't do those exact hours, but I could give them those hours on a different day. So, just being completely upfront with, what I knew I was capable of, and being transparent with my leadership team so they could help me.
Thank you. I think we're going to save the rest of the questions for the Q&A section at the end. For right now, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn, who's going to introduce Diana. Glenn?
Thank you, Luke, and good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Glenn Best, and I'm the Director of Career Works for the Newark Alliance. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Diana Palmera, who is an HR professional with over 10 years of experience in the transportation industry. Diana migrated from Colombia 20 years ago with her family and completed her high school in New York after learning English as her second language. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from CUNY, Hunter College, which she obtained while working as a full-time office manager, similar to our previous speaker. During her college years, she tutored middle school and high school students, teach them strategies to learn complex concepts. She currently works at Farmland Fresh Dairies, a food distributor located in Newark, New Jersey. Her areas of expertise include recruiting, onboarding, training, employee relations, performance management, leadership training, and development and safety. And in her spare time, she likes to spend time with her family and friends, and she volunteers at the local animal shelter. It's with my extreme pleasure that I introduce Diana Palmera.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating, for inviting us to this session of information. I am the recruiting manager at Farmland Fresh Dairies. We are a food distribution facility. We've been in business for more than 35 years. Currently located in Newark, New Jersey. We supply mainly dairy products to different types of customers in the tri-state area. It's possible that in some of your schools, you currently consume the Farmland Fresh Dairies. If you're familiar with the logo behind me, that's probably the milk that you consume at your schools. And so in our distribution centers, we're also, working with warehouse labor, truck drivers, and there's different career opportunities. Today, I want to talk to you guys about some tips when it comes to a successful interview. So I know my colleague previously talked a little bit about that, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of difficulty with doing the slideshow, but hopefully you guys can see my screen. So when you are graduating out of high school and you start to apply to jobs, you want to make sure that your resume, first of all, let's talk about the resume, that your resume kind of catches the recruiter attention. As a recruiter manager, and I'm sure a lot of people who are in recruiting, we get a lot of tons and tons of resumes every day. And there are different types of templates that candidates can use when presenting a resume. Some of them could be really difficult to read or understand, and that could certainly frustrate a recruiter when they're looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes per day. So when you're looking for an actual resume to work on, you want to make sure that it's as simple as possible. Some of you may say, what do you mean it's simple? So just focus on key things that you want to convey within your resume. So you want to make sure that you have a compelling objective. A lot of resumes nowadays don't even include an objective, maybe a cover letter, and even some of those are going away as well. But if you are into putting some type of an objective within your resume, you want to make sure you convey what your true passion is, what you want to get out of working for this particular company. You want to, if you're interested in a specific job when you're doing your job search, make sure you read the ad, read the job description, look at what is being required for the position, what are some of the skills that they're looking for, and try to add those as keywords within your resume. Why? Because as recruiters, because we get so many resumes into our database, sometimes we don't have enough time to look at 100 resumes per day. So what we do is we have a system similar to Google where you will just type in a keyword, and that keyword will populate or will show me only resumes that have those keywords within them. And that will narrow my search. Instead of having 100 resumes, now I have maybe 30 resumes that have the keyword customer service, or have the keyword attention to detail, or I have the keyword warehouse worker, or something like that. So that's going to narrow my search. It's going to help me focus on those particular individuals that I'm probably more geared towards calling for a phone call or inviting for an interview to meet with me. I also encourage you to do research on your own and look at resume templates. Google is a great database for you to search. You can find a lot of different templates that you can focus on, and I know that you're gonna be looking at one that I actually pulled up. It has a very basic structure. You also want to include relevant information stuff that you've been involved in with school, any achievements, if you belong to clubs, if you've participated in clubs or led any type of projects within the school. Those are things that employers are going to be interested in learning about, because you're using that as all of those projects have given you the ability to develop skills, and those skills are certainly are going to transfer, or are going to be useful for you when you're actually performing your jobs. Don't put too many sections within your resume. Just focus on the main things that you know you can kind of highlight about your career as a high school student. If you have participated in volunteer projects, if you do things outside of school, like myself, being an active participant in a animal shelter, or anything that you do outside of work with organizations, you definitely want to put that in your resume, because it shows that you care about the community, you're involved in different projects outside of school, you look for things to stay busy, to learn. So all of that is going to be important to put within your resume. And again, you will get a sample resume that I suggest you take a look into. It's very up to date. It has concise information. Keep it to 1 page. You don't need to extend in 2 and 3 pages. Again, recruiters have a lot to look into when they're trying to recruit, and the more concise you make it, the better it is for you. When it comes to a successful interview, so now that you've submitted your resume, you've made sure that you included everything you needed to do, now you start getting these phone calls, and maybe the recruiter may want to do a phone interview with you, or they may want to invite you to an interview on site. And so if they decide to do the interview on the phone, they're probably gonna be reviewing that resume with you on the phone. So you want to be prepared. Anything that you put together on paper, you want to make sure you know exactly what you put. You want to also keep track of which jobs you apply to, because sometimes as recruiters, we call a candidate and they have no clue who's calling them. They don't remember when they apply, what kind of job it is, and it really looks unprofessional, like you're not really interested in actually participating or joining our company. So you want to keep a list of what kind of jobs you apply for, what date you apply for them, and you want to do some little bit of research on those companies so that you're prepared when they contact you for either a phone interview or to set up an interview on site. If you actually are invited to come on site for an interview, first thing I would recommend is be prepared and show up on time. There is nothing worse than a recruiter can experience when interacting with a candidate when they actually don't show up on time for an interview. Okay, so being on time is key. If it means you have to get up an hour earlier, if it means you have to maybe prepare 2 hours in advance because you have to take a bus, do all of that in advance. Research the address, figure out where is this location, how long is it going to take you to get there, so that you show up on time for your interview. Late arrivals for interviews, it's a very bad first impression, and usually those candidates, at least on my list, don't get the job. When you arrive, be sincere, be kind, be pleasant, not just to the person that's going to interview you. It starts with the person that greets you at the front. It could be the security guard. It could be the person that's cleaning and they just say hello to you. Anybody within that company is someone that you're going to interact with if you get hired. So you want to make sure that you present a positive, sincere, and genuine attitude towards them, right? Because you may not think about it, but sometimes after you left the building, the security guard may call and say, oh, that candidate that you had today, Diana, was really unpleasant. He was rude. He didn't want to wait. He was kind of being rude towards me. And even though you did really great in the interview, the feedback that we got from other people that you could have interacted in the building could affect your ability to get the job. Before you arrive to your interview, make sure you put your phone on vibrate and put it away. You never want to pick up a phone call or respond to a text while you're in an interview. That is disrespectful. It just doesn't show that you're interested in the position that you're interviewing for. You're not interested in the conversation that you're having with the person. So you definitely want to keep the phone. If you need to leave it, put it in your pocket or put it in your purse, or just leave it in the car if you have a car. Just put it on vibrate. Make sure it's not part of your interview. Your body language should be positive as well. You don't want to be with your arms like this all the time when you're sitting at the interview, or have like you're not engaged during the interview, because managers and recruiters are looking for that as well. It's not just what comes out of your mouth, it's also what you're presenting when you're coming in for the interview. Be enthusiastic, ask questions. Sometimes it's good to ask questions. There could be things that you want to know about. So especially for what you're going to be doing for the company. So ask questions. Come prepared with at least 2-3 questions, because every time you have an interview, at the end of the interview, usually the manager or the recruiter is going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything else you want to know? And so that's the moment that they're giving you to find out more about the role or the company. Try to make eye contact with the person when you are giving an answer, because sometimes if you're staring at the wall and they're looking at you, it just doesn't convey the message that you're trying to give them. Say thank you, and that could be either by sending a thank you email, or you obviously will thank them for the interview at the time of the interview. But those are things that you definitely want to keep in mind, because usually those candidates are the ones that are going to stand out over other candidates that come through interviews for any type of company, but especially in transportation and distribution. I think these are some of the things that we're looking for. And it's not about your skills. We know that you don't come with a lot of experience, but if you demonstrate some of these things during your interview and you have a resume that shows some of your engagement in different activities, I'm sure that you'll be able to get a successful job starting for you right after high school. So that's all I have for you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. So now we're going to open up the section of the webinar that's dedicated to Q&As. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please be sure to put them in the chat. And I will start actually with a question for Diana. When you have questions for the recruiter, what are some good examples, when they ask if you have any questions for them?
Okay, so some of the questions that candidates have asked me include what will progress or career path growth would look like for me if I was to join your company. So I know that when we are starting a new position, we always want to look towards something better, right? We want to see it, like Jamie said, she didn't want to be a forklift operator forever. And so oftentimes companies are going to want to listen, are going to want to hear that you want to grow, that you have other ideas, or you want to try to figure out a career path within what you're looking for. Other questions that could come up could be with scheduling or flexibility. If you are already deciding to go to college, you want to be upfront. Maybe bring that up during an interview and say, I'm looking to enroll in college in September. What are some of the flexibilities with schedules that you can offer? Those are things that are not only relevant during the interview for the employer to know, but I think for you, you don't want to walk out of an interview with a lot of questions in your mind. Are they going to be able to accommodate my schedule? Is this going to be really what I want to do? I didn't really find out much, so when we give you the opportunity to ask questions, think of it like you go, I don't know, you're going to go buy something. You want to get a new phone. You start asking about what does that phone bring, right? What can they offer to you? You wouldn't buy the phone just because you saw it at you do research on it. So you do the same thing with the job. You want to research a little bit about what's going on.
Thank you so much. Next question is for Jamie. Please tell us about the importance of arriving to work on time and assuring that you dress correctly for your job.
All right. So attendance and showing up on time, I would say, is probably one of the most important things that you can do as an employee. Because if you can't do that task, I feel like it leads leaders to question how well you're going to perform with other tasks when they're not around. So show up on time. Like if you're on time, you're kind of late. Like I would show up a little bit before, plan accordingly. And that way, if you're showing up 5-10 minutes before your shift, you've run into a little bit of an emergency, you're still there on time. Obviously, there are some situations that might pop up that are outside of your control, but those should be very few and far between over the course of a year. And then dress code, I feel like every organization has, a pretty set dress code. So, understand what that is, ask follow-up questions if you're unsure. I always say it's better to ask before you would just assume that something would be okay. And asking questions never hurts. So just make sure you have a good understanding of what you are required to wear. Some places have uniforms, some don't. And then even like business casual, I feel like that has, multiple different definitions depending on the organization. So, having that follow-up question, does that mean jeans are okay? Are jeans not okay? Things like that I would, recommend.
Thank you. Do you have any tips on how to stay calm and not panicked during an interview?
Yeah, so I oversee all of our high school hiring and college internships and entry-level roles, and that's a question I get asked quite often. And so, few things I've told, candidates before in the past. One is just remember that the person sitting across the table from them or on the other side of that virtual interview, they've been in your seat multiple times. They're human just like you. And then the second piece is like you're the best expert to talk about yourself, right? Like yourself, your skills. Don't go in thinking like, oh, should I say this because I think that's what they want to hear. Like just be truthful in like what your skills are and what you know. And if they ask you something and you feel like you don't have that skill set, tell them, but then maybe ask them if it's something you feel like you have the ability to learn. Ask them their advice on like, okay, that's not something I've ever had experience with. However, what would be the best way, how would you recommend I learn that skill set? Because that's going to show initiative. And that goes a long way. Initiative that you want to learn is going to be a very positive assessment from the viewpoint of the interviewer.
And provided it goes well, how would you go about negotiating salary?
Okay, so I guess it depends on which position you're going for. So, some of the entry level roles, they do have kind of that starting salary that's across the board that you start at. So, those are good questions to ask. What does this role start at? Is there a range or is it a, set rate? Is there progression pay? What does the raises look like down the road? And then I would tie that into, career possibilities. I know when I did a career switch in my background, I took a little bit of a pay cut, but I knew that the long-term potential was there, and that meant more than necessarily making the same or a little bit more than what I had been at my previous role. So, those are all things. And then, there's a lot of data out there that you can get from places, Indeed, Glassdoor, there's some workforce boards that publish, wage information. So you can see if, what that role is, the range of what's acceptable, and then look at your skills and see where you kind of fall in that range.
What percentage of career success would you say is dependent on soft skills versus skills in a specific discipline or major?
A percentage. I would say soft skills are probably are a lot more important than the technical knowledge that you would maybe get from a major. So I went to school to be a teacher, and there are definitely parts of my role now that I'm able to pull some of that skill set, but a lot of it has been in, my willingness to learn and ask questions and really be, a good communicator and talking and collaborating with other individuals to get, projects done. So I think the soft skills, if you can, and there's a lot of resources out there to kind of learn soft skills. I know Prologis has a great curriculum around, supply chain fundamentals, but there's also some soft skills training in there around problem solving and things like that. You'll be able to use those soft skills in multiple different situations that'll help long-term success.
Thank you. And now this question is both for you and Diana. We've had multiple people in the chat kind of mentioning the fact that they've worked in other industries, or they've been working on a ship as a mate, or in public relations and healthcare. How would you go about best transferring your skills and showing them off in your new career change?
Yeah, so I can start there and I'll turn it over. So one of the things I've had happen to me multiple times is individuals will connect with me on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'd like to have an exploratory, conversation, not in supply chain, but I think I have some skills that would transfer. And so we have a very open conversation where, I ask them, like, explain to me what your normal, job duties are in your current role. And then we look for the skills and where they would translate. And then I'll make a recommendation to say, okay, like, based off what you said, I think these would be some good roles that would fit your skill set. And then from there, I ask the candidate to go look at those job descriptions and then kind of come back with, what they are thinking would be the best fit to kind of apply and move that process forward. I know a lot of organizations, you can go to career pages and you could do that job description review without reaching out to a recruiter. It's just there's a lot of different positions, so it might be a little hard to filter through it. And that's where I feel like connecting with a recruiter that can walk you through some of that up front will help you save some time.
I would also say I've encountered a lot of candidates that are looking for that transition, and I've noticed that several of them initiate somewhat of an educational transition into the role by exploring maybe certifications or something like there's a lot of community colleges that are offering programs in supply chain where they feel like or they start to do research into it, and they may start taking some college classes that are giving them somewhat of insight into what supply chain is about. So by the time that they're maybe starting to apply for jobs, that's something else that they can talk about during an interview or explore within their or add to their resume, where it's not just looking to transition those skills, but I'm also willing to become more have a better understanding of what supply chain is about, and I'm starting to do some research into it. So there are candidates that I've encountered that have already taken some classes in supply chain, or that are involved in projects outside of work with organizations that deal with supply chain, that has allowed them to. It may be a volunteer thing, but it allows them to kind of get the feedback a little bit into what supply chain is about, transportation and logistics.
Now, how would you go about determining your own value as an employee?
Determining your own value as an employee? Mm-hmm. Well, in our company, Farmland Fresh Dairies is a family-owned business. And I think that we have a lot of loyal employees that have been with the company for 25, 30 years. And I think that a lot of those employees have been able to somewhat mentor our newer employees into things like loyalty, work ethic, a positive attitude. Obviously, there's a great variety of employees within any organization, you're going to have the ones that are, obviously nobody's perfect, right? And everybody has his ups and downs. But I think that if I was to say what makes an employee valuable, it will be things like that, like your work ethic, your ability to overcome challenges and be a team player, and welcome or adapt to change is easily within an organization. Your ability to have a positive attitude even in the times of adversity. I could tell you right now, most companies are going through difficult times because of staffing needs. And the fact that there are employees that have to work double shifts to be able to ship out product, when you get employees that have that type of attitude, in the eyes of a business owner, I think that's what makes employees so valuable. And I could tell you, at least for Farm and Fresh Dairies, the owners, who happen to be four brothers who used to be truck drivers, right now they're doing everything possible to take care of the people they currently have, because they know how valuable it is to have the type of employees that we have that are such hard workers and committed to our operation.
Now, should you research the company you're applying for's competitors before an interview? Do you find that has any value?
I'll say it does. The more research you can do about companies in general, about positions, about the way you should do your interview, the better prepared you're going to be at the time that you have to actually participate, whether it's an on-site or virtual interview. You're gonna be able to present yourself as a knowledgeable candidate across the board. So knowledge will never hurt you. It will make you stronger. So any research you can do, the better.
Thank you. Got a bit of a fun question for both of you. When you're building a resume, there are things that you should put in and things you should leave out. Can you give some examples of things that should have been left out of resumes that you've seen?
So I could start there. I think sometimes individuals put in, because they want to like fill all the space, they put in items that are more fluff and not really a concrete like action or result they received. And as Diana spoke to earlier, like recruiters are really busy. They want to be able to look at a resume and really just see those actions and results. And so if you fill in a lot of extra stuff that doesn't hold meaning, it's just going to slow down that process there. One of the things I will say that I have liked seeing, and this is more, I think, a recent trend, is if there was a gap in employment due to like your own choice. So like, I've seen this sometimes where, women or men have taken time off because they had children and so they stayed at home for a period of time. Like just putting that on the resume as a one-liner sometimes helps answer that question that recruiters be like, oh, there was a job gap there and maybe there was an issue. And then when they see that, they're like, oh, okay, they stayed home for a few, and then they move on. And they don't necessarily see that as, a potential negative, job gap. So I have seen that as a trend that I do like, kind of helps answer that question before you even get to the phone interview process.
Right. I don't know if you guys can see the resume. I finally found it, but one thing that I've seen some candidates' resumes is including too many graphics or pictures of themselves. That's something that you definitely don't want to do. Sometimes we see that a lot for international resumes, but even national resumes, I don't know if it's becoming a trend, but I'm starting to see that quite often. And you don't want to include anything too personal about you. Another thing that I will recommend is create, if you haven't done so yet, a professional email address. So a lot of people create email addresses with nicknames of how their friends call them, or what their first email address when they were starting middle school or high school, which could have either profanity within it or offensive nicknames sometimes to other people. If email is going to be probably one of the first forms of communication that you're going to have with a recruiter or a company, so you want to make sure you have a professional email where companies can contact you on. So if you look at Andrew Smith, he's, well, in this case, it says Amelia Roberts, but let's say it was Andrew Smith at gmail.com. That's what you want to kind of have, right? It's very possible that that's not you can't just have first name, last name, but something that's professional, not the nicknames and things like that, because again, even though you think recruiters are not noticing, we actually do, right? When we're typing that email. And I was talking about the career objectives. You want to make sure it's concise, and you want to kind of convey what your goal is with applying for that job. Volunteer experience. This is a one-page resume. You have some skills here. And it's somewhat of a modern type of resume where you have, like, you don't have to actually type the word phone number or email address or anything like that. Like, you can use a lot of this. It kind of helps the company see that you may be more up to date with technology also, right? That you've learned how to put together a document that's a little bit more advanced than the norm. So certain things like your education, you definitely want to put there, because obviously you're a recent high school graduate. And if you've taken any courses that may have been classes that you could have taken in college, you also want to address that within your resume. I know there are a lot of high school students that have the potential to take college classes because of how well they're do or their selection for whatever they want to do in the future. Any awards, any scholarships, anything like that, you'd also want to mention within your resume.
Thank you. Now, this question is also for both of you. Now, given that interviews are generally stressful, especially for students who haven't, had a lot of experience doing that, there might be the type of person to say or like many times. Is that something that recruiters count against? Is that something that you even think about whatsoever? Should it be avoided, or should they, just be comfortable with how they're speaking?
I'm sorry, Luke, you broke down a little bit for me at the beginning of the.
Yeah. So for students who say the word or like or have these kind of filler words within their answers, is that something that you would count against them, or is that something that isn't even really considered in an interview because it's very stressful for them?
I normally don't judge a candidate by throwing those words within their interview, because I understand that they could be nervous. At the same time, if it interferes frequently with the interview to the point where you don't really understand what they're trying to say, then it could become a problem. So one thing is being nervous because it's your first interview and there's things that you are not sure how to answer. And another thing is being completely unprepared for the interview, where the interviewer is confused about what you're trying to convey, and they can see that you have not prepared at all, you're not interested, you're not engaged. And you're trying to mask that by saying things like this, or not really, trying to cover it like that is not going to really be helpful.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know that some of my hiring leaders, where we have our high school pipeline programs already developed, I think it's all about that trend. So if they've showed up on time, they're dressed appropriately, they ask good questions at the end, and then they have those ums and likes, they're not gonna, use that against the student, right? They realize this is, maybe one of their first jobs and they're nervous. But if, it's combined with maybe some of those other areas where they, showed up late, or like they're dressed, a little bit more unprofessionally, and they don't ask any questions at the end, so it shows they didn't do any of that kind of like pre-work, research that we talked about, then maybe like it kind of does weigh into their decision, because it's, multiple data points of like, okay, well, maybe they aren't a fit, maybe they don't really want this, type of perception that comes across.
Okay, I think we're going to do one more question here. For high school students who may not have much work experience, what sort of experiences from their school could they add to their resume?
Yeah, so I can share, a little bit. I was in that seat myself. When I graduated high school, I had not worked ever before. So I put in there, I was in sports, so I highlighted that. Any extracurricular, so I volunteered at an animal shelter, as well as like if you were on a big project and you took the lead, or like you felt like, what, I did a really great job on that project, you can use that as an example, right? And talk about some of those things you did and the actions you did to drive the success of that project. If there's any other, organizations that you get involved in, you can put those down as well.
Great. Thank you so much. So before we wrap up, I would just like to remind everyone about the LinkedIn job board that's been placed in the chat by Blair. That is a great resource for both available job postings as well as any upcoming TLD events, including our August 12th port tour, which I think would be a great resource for anybody looking to get into the TLD industry and really get a holistic view of what's going on in the port. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria, who will mention some more programs that we have. Victoria?
Thank you, Luke. Hi, everyone. So my name is Victoria Wen, and I am a current intern at the Port Department here at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And the following resources that I'm going to share with you emphasize how invested we are towards promoting job opportunities within the TLD industry. So specifically within the Port Authority, as Blair had mentioned and Luke had mentioned as well, we maintain that LinkedIn group. And it's a space that connects job seekers with local employers, and we frequently post there. We also have a compiled YouTube playlist that was mentioned before as well, that provides further insight into our port operations and the careers of this industry. As I had mentioned before, I am a summer intern at the Port Department, and this agency offers many internships and even tours that could be great opportunities for anyone interested. Again, just to emphasize, that our next port tour is actually on August 12th. And aside from the Port Authority, we often partner with other parties that are as invested in the TLD industry and workforce development. Prologis, which is a huge supply chain logistics company, is offering comprehensive training to prepare participants for valuable industry jobs. And in addition, the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program announced that it is offering free online training for those looking to be a certified manufacturing associate. So more details about this training program and about our resources in general can be found on our LinkedIn group and on the YouTube playlist. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. And thank you sincerely to all of our panelists. I would like to note to everybody in the audience that we will be following up with that sample resume that Diana had shared, as well as 7 tips for bettering your resume as well. That will be emailed to you shortly following this presentation. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. Thank you to our panelists. And we hope to see you join our LinkedIn job board. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.